commotion going on in the background. It's moving furniture and stuff.
Okay.
We thought it was a dog fight.
Yeah, it sounded a little, it's pretty loud. Theres furniture moving around. I think my husband just got the washer and dryer connected for her. So I think this is the last day of it. And it has convinced me that I never want to move ever in my life. I'll stay in my house forever.
It's really a job. Yeah.
Well, if Paul, are you expecting a lot of other people to join? I'm happy to get started whenever you guys are.
Yeah, well, yeah, you can get started now. We'll have a few other people most likely, but you can get started.
Okay, well, I'll start with an introduction. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kelly Jameson. I'm the Public Information Officer at Las Cruces Public Schools, and I've had a 25-year career in communications since graduating from New Mexico State University with a bachelor's in journalism, and I have a master's in communication studies. My history here in the Valley has been mostly with the Doña Ana County Sheriff's Department, but I left there in 2020. March 1st, I started at the school district right before all the proverbial stuff hit the fan with the COVID-19 pandemic. So I've been there a little over a year, and it has been one crisis after another. So my presentation to you today has just been how the school district has functioned in the midst of a pandemic, dealing with multiple crises, how we handle crisis communication, how we share that information to our families, our staff, and our community, and where we are today. So if I can share my screen, I will start with there you go. So I just put a small presentation together for you. So the name of my, what am I doing? Excuse me.
I got into it. It seems like it might.
There we go.
That looks good.
All right, oops, there we go. What am I doing? There we go. So my presentation is just keeping minds open when schools were closed and other crises at Las Cruces Public Schools. I don't know if anybody has had children in the school district or what your experience has been with it, but towards the end, I'd love to get some feedback on what your perceptions have been throughout this crisis and how the school district has functioned. As you may not know, Las Cruces Public Schools is the largest employer in Doña Ana County. We have a little over 24,000 students. We have 3,500 staff, 2,500 of which are teachers in the classroom. So the school district has the uniqueness of really reaching nearly every household in Doña Ana County in some capacity. So March 13th is the day that I usually start with. That's when it was a Friday the 13th. I was working for Dr. Karen Trujillo and our immediate, what we call cabinet, our executive cabinet, which includes the two deputy superintendents, the public information officer, which is me, our chief of staff, our chief financial officer, and our chief technology officer. We all got together that Friday because we had school groups traveling abroad. We had a middle school group going to California. We had high school groups traveling to Washington, D.C. for the Student Television Association competition in Washington. And once all of the students were in the air, the public education department notified schools that we were going to have to close our buildings because of the imminent threat of the pandemic. So the scramble initially was to figure out how we were going to get our students home, how we were going to communicate that to our families. And initially it was our understanding that this would really just be an extended spring break. So we sent students home just with the instructions that they would be gone for a couple of weeks and we would regroup in the beginning of April. We now know that a school would not return at all that semester. So once the public education department advised us, and the public education department, or the PED as we call it, is the state education agency for New Mexico. They are our governing body. They're the boss, so whatever they say, we have to execute. The plan was really to get that cabinet group together again and figure out how we were going to switch to fully remote for the rest of the semester. Obviously, our primary concern was making sure that all of our students had access to technology. And amazingly enough, we had planned a bulk order of tablets and laptops at the beginning of January. So those shipments were coming in. We really had enough devices that we were able to address that head on. We did have a ratio of 1-to-1 by the end of that semester, which was pretty remarkable. Our other challenge was making sure that our students had access to the internet. The city was very instrumental in helping us with a $150,000 grant, which we used to partner with Comcast and bridge those gaps. We also had hotspots that we were able to distribute throughout the district to our students who lived in the more rural parts of Doña Ana County, and they didn't have where Comcast was not a provider in the area. The other immediate need that we had to fill was food insecurity. About 80% of our students in Las Cruces Public Schools qualify for free or reduced lunch. So making sure that our students stayed fed while they were learning remotely was job one. In addition to making sure that they had access to technology, we had to make sure that they were fed. And then all of the intricacies that went along with that, making sure we were COVID compliant. So the solution was what we were calling our grab and go lunch stops, where we would distribute breakfast and lunch from our schools in the drive-throughs and then the parking lots. So we had one centralized kitchen at Las Cruces High School where we would put all of our breakfast and lunches together. And then we had volunteers from the community that were initially helping us to shuttle those meals to our school sites. And then we worked through a partnership with FYI, and we are still partnering with FYI. They will actually take over this summer our breakfast and lunch distribution. When I say that the PED really calls all the shots, they really do. When they say that we go remote, it is their direction that we go remote. They also authorize the district to come up with a return entry plan, and that's really what that was our blueprint for how we were going to get, how we were going to get students back in the classroom. So we came up with what we were calling our dashboard. This was our go-to place on the website for the community to see how we were going to safely return students and staff to the classroom. And we call this our one-stop shop. We also had everything we do in the school district is translated into Spanish. We also have a translation department that communicates with our Vietnamese families and those that speak Mandarin. We don't have that on our website yet. Primarily, the families that we work with are either English or Spanish. This is I was just going to show you really quickly our COVID-19 news and resources page. We started early on reporting our positive cases to the community, and this is updated ideally every day. We've had a slight hiccup. I'm looking at May 13th, but this is where you can go to find out on what day how many positive cases are being reported in the district. Initially, we were just reporting staff cases, and then about 6 weeks ago, I made the determination to start including student cases as well when the students were back in the classroom. So if you ever want to know where we are at in the district with COVID-19 cases, you can come to this dashboard. We also had developed a crisis communication plan. I think I hit back too many times. Let me just, yeah. This was our communication plan to families. When we did return students to the classroom, it was important to us to let our community know what happens in the event of a positive case in school. This was our assurances document to the community. If a child tests positive in your child's classroom, this is what the district is going to do. We will contact families that have been determined to be a close contact. We will inform any student or staff that has been affected by that contact tracing. We do extensive cleanings in our buildings. You might know that we are on a 4-day class schedule right now. We have deep sanitation on Wednesdays and Fridays. And then we do, when there's a positive case inside one of our buildings, we have an additional deep cleaning. And then this was just a reiteration at the bottom of how our families can keep our schools and communities safe.
Paul, we're not seeing the charts.
What, we didn't see any of those.
You couldn't see those?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, are you looking at the PowerPoint again?
We're seeing crisis communication with
Okay.
4 bullets.
I'm sorry, I think I needed to have stopped sharing and then reshared. Let me go back and see if, okay. You're still seeing the PowerPoint, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, let me go back and share. Okay. So this is our communications plan. I think this is what you're seeing now. I apologize. Let me go back to, this is what I was talking about that I don't think you were seeing. This is our website, and this is the dashboard that I was talking about that I apologize. I don't think you're seeing.
Okay.
And I think I'm having internet issues. Can you see me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is what we call our COVID-19 dashboard. This is our one-stop shop in English and in Spanish on how the district developed a return plan back to the classroom and what our reporting practices are in the district. And this is the case status that I was talking about that you couldn't see. I apologize. This is where we report all of our positive cases in the district. So if you wanted to see where positive cases were being reported in Las Cruces Public Schools, you could come to this dashboard. It's lcps.net/return plan/COVID news. And then the other thing that I shared with you that you weren't able to see was our communication plan. This was the assurances document that we created to give families an idea of what happens once a positive case is determined to have been in the classroom. We have assurances to our community that we will not share news with the entire school. Obviously, we have some HIPAA and FERPA regulations in place that determine how we communicate that information. We also, again, had some boilerplate information on how you can keep your school and your community safe. Let me go back to my PowerPoint. Okay, so the crisis communication plan for the district included that dashboard. It included that one-stop shop on our website on how we were developing the plan to return to the classroom. One important thing that we did over the summer last year was surveys with families to determine the interest of going back to school when it was safe to do so. That was really necessary, to figure out what we needed to address as far as remote learning versus in-person learning, but we also needed to figure out if we had enough staff when we were able to bring students back to the classroom, were we going to have enough teachers to facilitate that. The school district works with 2 different unions. CSEC is our classified staff that includes our cafeteria workers and our custodial services. We also have the NEA, National Education Association, and that is our teacher union. It was really important in the beginning to get those union presidents on board, keep the lines of communication open so that when we were making plans of the district, we had their complete support and buy-in. Schools don't function without teachers, so we needed to make sure that the teachers were confident in our plan and they felt safe in the classroom. We started a partnership with the Las Cruces Sun News. Some of you might see every Sunday in the community section, Las Cruces Public Schools has a column, a weekly op-ed that communicates to our families and our communities what's going on sort of behind the scenes at Las Cruces Public Schools. Today's column was about summer learning opportunities, but prior to this semester, nearly every single Sunday's column had to do with something related to the COVID-19 crisis and how we were working behind the scenes to get our students back in the classroom. In-touch messaging. In-touch is a a software program that we have at the district that sends out emails to families in the district. And we also have the ability to send out text messages. So when we had a date in mind to return to the classroom, we were regularly communicating that to the families, because there was a large segment of our high school populations that really disengaged during the pandemic. So it was important to re-engage with them, get them back on track if they had fallen off the radar during the pandemic, and make sure that we were addressing those students that we had lost touch with. We also have a Facebook page and a Twitter page that has been very instrumental in communicating with our families where we have been throughout this crisis and when the first day of school was going to be. I mentioned those sanitation schedules earlier. That was part of the return plan and the assurances documents with the Public Education Department that we had to file. We also instituted a very wide-scale wellness check protocol at all of our schools. So when our students did return to the classroom, everybody goes through a wellness check, which is just an initial screening for fever or any other COVID-19 symptoms. It was very cumbersome. Those first few days were frankly a nightmare, trying to get people moving in quickly through the buildings and then screening out those that didn't pass the wellness checks. We have isolation stations in every building so that if somebody is determined to be symptomatic, we can isolate them and communicate with families to get them picked up quickly. Something that has helped that process has been a kiosk that we have stood up in all of our school buildings that looks like an iPad. You can walk up to it and it can take your temperature in about 3 seconds. That has helped speed things up tremendously at all of our school sites. February 22nd was our magic day to return. That was when we brought high school students back in the ninth grade classes. We brought 6th graders back in the middle schools, and then what we were calling small groups. Small groups at the elementary level were those medically fragile children that really needed the one-on-one classroom attention, who were struggling during remote learning and really needed to be back in the classroom. Some of you probably have heard this news. Right in the middle of getting our students back in the classroom, our superintendent, Dr. Karen Trujillo, was hit and killed while she was walking her dogs. This was on February 25th. And really our entire return plan and getting kids back in the classroom was the work of Dr. Trujillo. So it felt like a weekend of complete tragedy and crisis, but we were in the classroom again and the work had to continue. We did meet with the Board of Education on March the 1st. That's when Mr. Ralph Ramos was named the district's interim superintendent. Mr. Ramos has been in the district for 28 years. Prior to being named interim superintendent, he was the principal at Camino Real Middle School. Has a very successful history in leadership in our district. He has sort of picked up where Dr. Trujillo left off. His contract is through June 30th, and where we are right now is we're back on track, so to speak. For the first time since the pandemic started, we will have graduations for our high school seniors next Friday and Saturday. So very exciting news because a lot of our seniors felt like they had those more traditional time-honored events taken away from them. The class of 2020 didn't get one at all. We had the drive-through graduations, and we are working through a plan for this summer to have a class of 2020 graduation just for them. The end of our semester is May the 26th, and actually the board met on Friday with 4 finalists for our permanent superintendent position, and their goal is to have a permanent superintendent in place by June 1st. Again, Mr. Ramos's contract is up on June 30th, and the idea is that Mr. Ramos is actually a candidate for the permanent position. In the event the board names somebody else, he will be there to help with the transition to new leadership. I feel like I went through a lot the last year or 2 months really, really quickly, but that's an overview of how the district handled a couple of really tremendous crises with our students and getting them back into the classroom. But again, would love to hear your perspective of how the district has functioned. I don't know how your church community has handled crisis communication, if you are back in your buildings yet, or if you're all still meeting remotely. You're still remote, yeah.
Well, that was a good, quick summary, Kelly. Well done.
Lightning speed. We could probably spend another year talking about and dissecting all of this.
Anything but normal.
Anything but normal, absolutely. And you know, as Paul knows, I'm a mom. My girls go to Centennial High School. Our oldest daughter, graduated from Las Cruces High School. She's married and on her own now. But one of the hardest things working for the school district has been filtering out a tremendous amount of criticism from our community. And I get that. We're under a microscope all the time, constantly criticized for the decisions that we make or the decisions that we don't make. And it's hard not to take it personally sometimes when you have people that will call you and they're very, very critical about things that we have done. And I think, well, you know, I've got kids in the district too. It's not been the easiest year by far. I think this has been the most trying in education. And again, I'm still brand new in the school district. After having been here a year, I've only really been in the office since February 22nd. So it's been a huge adjustment, both personally and professionally.
Anybody else have a question? Go ahead, Carol.
How did you handle those students who were traveling when you were told to close the schools?
That's a really good question. Once we were on the phone with them while they were in the air with the teacher chaperones, we made contact with while they were in the air. Once they landed, we coordinated with the hotels to have them stay overnight, and then we worked to get their return trips expedited. So they had to spend 2 days in Washington, and then we were able to put them back on planes and fly them home.
And their contests were called off, or?
They were canceled. They were going to do them remotely. This was, again, the Student Television Network. These are high school level media classes that work all year long to put together broadcast quality product to show off at the national level. And it would have been ideal to have done it remotely because it is a digital medium, but they weren't able to get it done. Mr. Steele.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And, you know, in terms of the criticism you all have received, as a member of the community, I want to tell you that your teachers and administrators, all of you have the most important jobs of anybody in this town. And, I really appreciate what you're doing. I'm really curious about how the school district is monitoring student learning and student progress, and what kinds of planning is being made to help students get caught back up who have not adapted well to the distance learning format.
That's an excellent question. Unfortunately, the state decided to cancel all of our spring aptitude tests. The state didn't feel that it was fair to accurately gauge this past year because the students have been remote. But that will eventually happen. And right now the guidance has been that we will probably initiate some aptitude tests at the beginning of the semester next year so that we can sort of start a baseline for any kind of learning loss or the gaps in learning that students have had over this past year. And that's going to be interesting. We had an opportunity to extend the school year by 10 days. It was legislative funded. It was about $12 million, and our Board of Education voted no. That they also felt that it was unfair, that teachers were tired, students were tired, but the administration was disappointed. And I can admit that freely, because our superintendent felt that that was a good opportunity to spend 10 solid days gauging learning loss with some quick benchmark aptitude tests and trying to get them caught up and on a good footing for the upcoming fall semester. It's a struggle when we talk about New Mexico's place in education nationally. We are at the bottom, and it's frustrating to continually see New Mexico at the bottom when we have opportunities to get ahead, and politics sometimes get in the way.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Got a
Dave
comment?
and Jim, Dave?
Yeah, I have a question, Paul. This is Dave, Dave Rice. What drives the procedures that are used to prepare the schools, for example, the sanitization and so on? And can you comment on that?
Yes, we have, again, through the PED, the Public Education Department has had some operational guidelines for us on the type of chemicals that we are to use that have been approved for COVID-19 compliance documents. And those come from the CDC and the World Health Organization. So as the guidance comes from national leaders in health, we adapt them for the school district, and those are the policies that we follow with respect to sanitation.
Thank you.
I can tell you that one of the chemicals we use is made by Clorox. So it's a very recognizable name brand.
Well, the reason I ask is so many of these guidelines have changed. For example, even the issue of surface transmission, which of course in schools must be a really big deal, but the CDC again seems to have pulled back on concern over that, and that could affect everything from timelines to staffing.
Correct, and we have adapted somewhat with those same guidelines. The one area that we have not changed is sanitation. So when the district or when the PED told us that we would have to use what's called a Clorox 360 cleaning method, it's done with sprayers. It is done from the top of the classroom to the bottom, and then we have to leave the building sealed for 24 hours. That's what facilitated that Wednesday hiatus. And that's why we do the secondary sanitation on Fridays so that the building can settle over the weekend. We've not changed that at all. Even with new guidance on surface transmission, we've just decided to err on the side of caution and keep those practices in place.
Thank you.
And anyone else? Comment, question?
So
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead, Nanette, go ahead.
So our schools set up to still keep social distancing in the classrooms, or did
Yes.
they reduce class sizes?
We had reduced
In
class,
the classrooms, you know what I mean?
right, for in-person learning. We had reduced the size of classrooms, and we were only, we had 6 feet social distancing in the classroom on February 22nd, and that's why we only brought back abbreviated classes at each grade level, elementary, middle, and high school. Working through the end of February, and then of course through the end of March, the guidance from the state has been to socially distance to the greatest extent possible, which is a very vague recommendation. And when we hear that, you know, as administrators, we kind of have to chuckle because we're talking about children that have been isolated for a year. They're very social creatures. We have students in high school that when you tell them to socially distance to the greatest extent possible, they think that's funny. It's a joke to them. So we've tried to do the best we can. So one of the more critical events over the last semester was trying to put together proms and academic award ceremonies for our seniors and our high school students. Some of you might have heard what they were calling the secret prom. That was a group of Mayfield students who got together. It was the first weekend in April. There was about 200 students that decided to host their own prom at a private residence north of town. And then there was a teacher at Mayfield that found out about it and reported it to the public education department. When the school was notified, the state told us that it was their hope and expectation that we would investigate that event. And that's what led to our interim superintendent deciding to cancel classes at Mayfield, the whole school, for an entire 14 days. That was met with tremendous criticism from parents who were frustrated. They had just gotten their students back in the classroom. And now this very reckless social event that was held off campus outside of school hours had an impact on our in-person learners. And that was confusing to a lot of us. My initial reaction was, are we going to be forced to investigate every event outside of the classroom that could potentially have a threat to in-person learning? There was a lot of learning opportunities in that, and if we had it to do all over again, I'm not sure it would have been handled in the same way. But fortunately, and I'm very happy to report, that was not a super spreader event. There was no COVID-19 cases that came out of that, and high schools did put together plans for COVID-safe proms. And they just had the last one yesterday. Centennial High School had their prom. So all the high schools have had an opportunity to have a prom this year.
Did those students that were involved in that, some of them got really reprimanded in a fairly serious way. Has that been kind of released or laid back? Or?
Yeah, there was really no punishment related to it. The district doesn't have the authority to do anything to that extent, except prohibit our student athletes from participating in any type of NMAA sanctioned event. NMAA is New Mexico Activities Association, and they're the governing body for all of our academic groups and all of our athletics. So there was that recourse that we had.
Because I have a few friends that have kids, and they mentioned that.
Yeah, it was such an unfortunate event, but you know, our interim superintendent has two daughters of his own. They've already graduated from high school, but he's very sensitive to the social emotional health of our students, and trying to impart some kind of punishment when they were just trying to return to normal didn't seem appropriate. But it did have to be addressed, and the solution was just to close school for 2 weeks and make sure that everybody was healthy.
Good. Anyone else? Comment, questions?
Susan has been trying.
Susan, and I can't hear her.
Are you muted?
No, she's not, but.
Yeah, Susan.
Did you type her question in the chat?
Oh, there she is. There's Susan. Go ahead, Susan.
We can't hear you, Susan.
There, now it's all right.
No.
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 Okay, it must be my computer. Something's
We can
weird.
hear you
We
now.
hear you now.
We can hear you now.
Okay, never mind.
No, you're, go ahead. We can hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now? Okay. All right. Well, I do not have a child in the school right now. I'm retired. I was a teacher in many years ago, and actually I've been a volunteer at Conley Elementary School for probably 8 years before COVID.
Well, thank you.
And I actually want to congratulate you. Having worked in schools for many years as a teacher and a social worker, to me, you had an absolutely unbelievable task in front of you, and I think you did a phenomenal job. And I think that you need to remember that it's the people who are upset and don't like what you've done who complain. And my guess is that many families were very happy with what you did. So, you need to remember that. And my question, and maybe you covered this and I just don't remember, but when the kids go back to school in the fall, will they go back 5 days? And will there also be a choice of going back in person and virtually, or only back in the classroom?
We will have classes 5 days a week next semester. And I think talking about those cleaning protocols, I think that's when we will have an opportunity to shift those practices and make sure that we can keep things clean, but still bring students back on Wednesdays. If this crisis has taught us anything, it's that we will have to provide an opportunity for students to learn remote forever. We figured out how to do it. For some students that works very well. We have some high school students that have certain situations in their families that require them to work. And remote learning has been very helpful in adjusting their schedules so that they can do both. So the answer to your question is there will always be that option for our students to either come in person, or if they want to stay remote, they can. Prior to the pandemic, we had what we called our virtual learning academy inside the school district. We called it a school within a school. And it was sort of a pilot project for remote learning. And then when COVID happened, we just took that VLA model and expanded it district-wide. So what we are planning for next semester, next school year, is a very robust, expanded VLA. So our virtual learning academy will be that option for students to stay remote if they choose to.
Will it be all the way down to elementary school, or will it only just be in high school and middle school?
It's district-wide. So if you have elementary students that prefer to stay home, some of those medically fragile students that prefer to stay home and not be in the classroom, they can opt for VLA also.
Okay. Thank you
Mr.
very
Steele.
much.
Sure.
Could I
Thank you.
follow up on that? That sounds very interesting. How does that work? Is the VLA asynchronous learning, or is it some form? Is it in part synchronous? How do you blend in-person learning and virtual learning at the same time?
We have, excellent question. We have what we call Canvas. Canvas is an online-based time management tool and records or document sharing tool that NMSU has used for years. We have also adopted Canvas, and so teachers have created shell classes inside Canvas, and that's the tool that remote learners use to track their assignments and also to log into Zoom for instruction. That asynchronous learning model is really important in the Zoom world because students can work on things on their own time, but then they have scheduled classes that they can log on and watch in-person instruction, or teachers record the classes and then students can watch it when it's convenient to them. So Canvas has been very critical in having sort of a central hub for students to follow what the teacher has planned for the week.
Thank you.
I have a friend of mine that is a teacher in one of the schools here. And as you were going kind of between virtual and in class, she had some on virtual and some in the class. And she basically had to teach both of them. And it required a fair amount of work, she said, on her part.
It is. Teachers impress me on a level that I didn't know it ever existed. Susan, thank you so much for your time and dedication to the classroom. Teachers are extremely flexible professionals, and I know that there was some trepidation at the beginning of remote learning with teachers who had been doing this job for 30 years, and adapting to an online model was very scary to them, and the learning curve was tremendous. We addressed that through what we called Canvas captains, and each school had an assigned Canvas captain that would work through those learning gaps that teachers had with getting their Canvas classroom stood up, how they were going to navigate through Zoom. I don't know, but I had never heard of Zoom until the pandemic hit. Had no idea.
Join the club.
Had no idea what it was. I remember I volunteer with the Community Foundation, and we had a board meeting, and I got an email to Zoom, and I thought, what is that? Don't even know what it is. And now it's second nature to us. We all exist in these little boxes and everyone knows what Zoom is these days. Dave? Yeah.
Yeah, with regard to the virtual program you mentioned, then a student is really a student still in the same classroom. It's just a virtual. So it's not like a separate school that's really virtual.
Correct. So they are enrolled in the Virtual Learning Academy, but they're still attached to their district school, their zone school. So you can attend VLA classes, but still graduate from Mayfield High School, or you still would go to Conley Elementary, but through the VLA.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Kelly,
Yes, sir.
I'm curious about, you seem to have a lot of autonomy, excuse me, except for possibly PED, which has its own suggestions or whatever. Number one, how many school districts are there throughout New Mexico? And number two, is there any interaction, or is everybody doing his own thing, doing all of these creative activities?
There are over 200 districts in New Mexico. Las Cruces is the second largest school district behind Albuquerque Public Schools. And to answer your question, our superintendents have a weekly meeting on Thursday mornings. They meet with the PED leadership, and then they meet separately just among superintendents. And they've shared a lot of best practices and recommendations. We've helped each other along the way, and commiserated together, quite frankly, on how to address certain problems and find solutions for things. So there's a lot of networking that has happened. And if we can't figure something out, we've looked to those similar school districts like Rio Rancho and Albuquerque to help us where we can't figure it out on our own. But there is a lot of autonomy at the district level, but there's that big brother level at the state that they'll let you know if something doesn't quite meet with their requirements.
A follow-up, if I may.
Yeah,
Yes,
go
sir.
ahead, Charlie.
You mentioned earlier that we are at the bottom, and I keep hearing that from so many places in terms of ranking of education. Your district, you're being so creative, and I'm so impressed with what's going on. So it doesn't seem like that should be what's keeping us at the bottom. Is it further up the line, or do you have any feelings about what we ought to be doing to get some improvement?
Well, it's easy to sit where I am and think we're doing such a good job. We are doing the absolute best that we can. There's a saying in education, thank God for Mississippi, because usually if we're not at the bottom, Mississippi is. But a lot of those rankings are done based on graduation rates. And we're better than we have been. Las Cruces Public Schools has an 86% graduation rate for seniors, which sounds low. You want it to be as close to 100% as possible. But New Mexico has a very real, we struggle with poverty. A lot of our students come from very social, emotional, broken backgrounds. And it's not possible to address every student equally, although that's what we are required to do, is provide equity in the classroom across the board. There hasn't been a connection yet with education and financial aptitude throughout the district, but there is a connection to that, and I don't know what the solution is. I know that there are brains much brighter than mine that are working to address that, but as a parent and as somebody in this community, I'm very concerned about how this last year is going to surface in the future and how it's going to translate into graduation rates of those students that have been disconnected and isolated, and how that year of isolation is truly going to affect them. Something that I also failed to mention, that isn't in the news very often. We struggled throughout this last year with student suicide rates, which is a horrible, awful thing to have to talk about, but it happened. We lost 5 students over the pandemic to suicide. And that was something that motivated administrators to get our kids back in the classroom. And I'm sure that we're not alone nationwide. I'm sure that you would probably see that in other communities as well.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
I saw some national press about that, and it's not just here.
It's devastating.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, you know, how the district was addressing mental health issues and with students and staff.
Our counselors have been pretty instrumental over this past year connecting with students. Something that, and Susan, you probably know this, teachers are often the first line of defense against abuse at home. They see it, they're trained to look for it in the classroom, and they're obligated to report it. Not having your students in your classroom makes that extremely difficult. But teachers still can identify those students who aren't engaging at the level that they used to, and they will use their counselors at school and deploy them to those houses for some reinforcement. In the extreme rarest of cases, we have actually gone to students' homes to check on them if they've not been engaging in online learning. But counselors have been pretty versatile in Zoom and reaching out to students to gauge that social emotional health during the pandemic.
Anyone else have a comment or question?
Annette?
Yeah, I have a question. I could imagine that it's that remote learning might have also had some positive effects on some kids, that they would not have to be around kids in person, you know, that it was a relief for them to like, oh yeah, I don't have to be around those idiots that, you know, are nasty to me on a daily basis.
Yes.
I mean, is there any feedback that teachers have received in that respect? You know, is anybody just saying like, oh, it's such a sad thing for all the students?
We've had a lot of feedback from teachers on the level of bullying that doesn't happen in a remote environment. So if there is any positive, if there's anything positive to come out of being remote, it's that those classroom bullies haven't had access to their victims like they would in a normal year. We were seeing different kinds of bullying in remote learning, and you wouldn't think so, but kids are mean. Kids are very, very mean. And when we bought headphones for every student in the district because we were getting a lot of feedback from families that, you know, they had 3 students at home, 3 different grade levels. They're all on a computer trying to learn. And it's very distracting when you have other computers in the room and you're trying to focus on yours. So we bought headphones for students and provided an opportunity for families to pick those up. What we were seeing was if the students had AirPods, they were cooler than the kids that had headphones that went over their ears. And the kids that were wearing their headphones were getting bullied online. And so we had to address that. But I mean, you think, just when you think it couldn't get any worse, what would you possibly have to bully a kid over headphones for? But it happened. It happened.
Oh my God.
Anyone else? We got about 10 minutes left. If there's questions, comments, concerns?
Just
Anyone?
applause.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, this was very educational for us, very much so.
Thank you for having me. It was wonderful to spend my afternoon with you. Thanks for all of your positive feedback and all of your questions. They were brilliant. Thank you.
Oh,
Okay,
I have another one.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, go ahead.
Did any of our schools take learning outside during any of this time?
They did. We had a lot of elementary classrooms that shifted to outdoor settings. They also had, I wish that I could take everybody on a field trip to Valley View Elementary. That's one of the most inspiring schools in our district. And they had a lot of teachers that made outdoor gardens. Prior to bringing students back, they worked pretty quickly to get some gardens put together. So when students came back, they had an outdoor curriculum that would take them outside of the classroom, and that worked very well. I'm sure other schools did too. Valley View's the only one that I know of off the top of my head that successfully created an outdoor learning environment like that.
Where is that school?
Valley View is on California Street. It's right next door to Immaculate Heart of Mary Cathedral on the corner of Espina and California. It's actually one of our oldest elementary schools.
Oh, okay, cool.
They've been open for 55 years.
All right.
Older than some of us, but not most of us. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Yes.
Really
Thanks,
appreciate
Mr. O'Connell. It was nice to meet all of you. Thank you for welcoming me in.
Thank you, thank you,
Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
All
right. Bye.
Next week,
Bye.
I think. Daniel Cobb, he's going to talk about, this is a great course series, and he'll talk for about 30 minutes, and then he's going to talk about manifest destiny and of the natives and that sort of thing. And it's really quite well done. He's presenting the side from the how the natives were mistreated by Europeans, and it was around the Civil War time. And so then we'll be able to discuss it after that presentation for about a half an hour.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thanks, Paul.
Bye.
Bye.